Anyway, getting back to what's important, the change of this show. So what I'm gonna do is instead of doing well, first of all, I'm gonna take next week off. And next week I'm going to work on the transition of the show. So next week I'm not gonna be doing any full-length streams. I'll still be doing some patron Rockfin premium stuff. I'll still be doing some short videos. But as far as like full-length streams, I'm just gonna take the week off to work on this transition. So what is this transition gonna be? Well, what I'm gonna do, instead of doing a more daily oriented stream, I'm going to do shorts throughout the first part of the week. And then I'm going to do a full length stream on Thursday. Now, granted, this may vary depending on my road schedule, but generally, when I'm not touring, Thursdays will be the full length stream. Thursdays at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. I'm going to keep the same time. And I'm just going to go through all the headlines of that week. So it's going to be, instead of just a couple headlines each day, it's going to be all the headlines on Thursday. So that's the big switch. And as far as guests are concerned, I'm just going to have another stream where I'm going to just interview a guest. And for all you podcast listeners, what I will likely do, I thought about just doing headlines the first half of the podcast and an interview the second half of the podcast. What I think I'm going to do is I'm just going to drop 2 different podcasts instead of having, because if I did one really long podcast, it might get into like the 2-hour range, which I feel like that's just a pain in the ass. I'd rather do 2 different podcasts. And plus that way, as a listener, if you just want to get the headlines, you can, just listen to that podcast first and then listen to the interview later, whoever it is I'm interviewing. If you're like, oh, I'm interested in that guest, but I just want to get the headlines for the week now, well, you can get the headlines in its own podcast and you can get the interview in a separate podcast. Does all that make sense? So that's what I'm going to be doing. So a lot of these shorts, you guys are enjoying these shorts, which I appreciate a lot. Cause I'll tell you what, if you guys give me an excuse to walk around a beach more often than I already do, I'm going to fucking take it. So you guys are like, Rob, we really like these shorts where you just like do a minute-long video breaking down something while you're walking around on a beach. I can oblige that. I will make more of those videos, and I post those videos on YouTube Shorts. I post those videos on Rockfin. I post those videos on Twitter. I post them on Instagram. I post them on TikTok. Feel free to follow. I don't know what I'm doing on TikTok, but please follow me there. I'm trying to figure it out. I don't know what I'm doing, but I am on TikTok. It's Ron Placone. Please follow me there. I do post there, and I'm figuring it out as I go. Now, one of the things that I've started doing already is I post everything now to my Patreon. I had to do the look. So, my Patreon now, I don't just post the patron only, Rockfin Premium only content. I post that as well, obviously, but I also post everything else. So every short that I do gets posted on Patreon. Every stream I do gets posted on Patreon. Obviously, the patron stream get posted on Patreon. So if you're thinking, Ron, I want to make sure I get all your stuff. YouTube is not notifying me. They haven't been notifying me. How do I make sure I get everything? Best way to do it, become a patron or a Rockfin Premium member. That's the best way. And my Patreon is give what you can. So, no matter what you give, whether it's $1 a month, whether it's $5 a month, whether it's $10 a month, you all get the same stuff. And you get all of my stuff in one convenient place. And you also get all the perks of membership. What are some of the perks? Well, I'll make you a theme song. I got a queue of theme songs. I'm going to start pumping more of them out, but I'll make you your own theme song. Who doesn't need their own theme song? Everyone does. You can get that for a give what you can level. I do Zoom shows on a regular basis for patrons. So you'll be able to attend those Zoom shows. And I do a patron stream once a week where I respond directly to the patrons and Rockfin Premium members. So you'll get all that in addition to everything else I do in one place. So if you're thinking, man, I want to support what Ron does, I want to get all of his stuff in one convenient place, you can get all that for $1 a month. You're thinking, man, I don't have a ton of cash, but $1 a month, I can spare $1 a month. Please consider it. Again, patreon.com/Ron Placone. Also, So that brings me to my next topic here as far as the restructuring of the show. And again, I'm going to do all the headlines in one stream, typically on Thursdays. Now, the only time that day will vary is when my tour schedule requires it to vary. But generally, it's going to be Thursdays at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific, where I'm going to do all of the headlines of the week. And I'll do shorts throughout the week. So I'll drop shorts all throughout the week, and then I'll do the longer streams on Thursday. Also, the what was the other announcement? Oh yeah. So this brings me to, you might be thinking, what about the regular contributors? What's going to happen there? Well, what I'm thinking I'm going to do is when I do my headline streams, hopefully the regulars will be able to do that. My regulars are Krish Moen, comedian Krish Moen, very funny guy, Lauren Ashcraft, and Savage Joy. I love doing stuff with all those folks. They all have ties to Pennsylvania too, which is ironic. They all that's not on purpose, by the way. Some would be like, Rod is really biased towards his home state. I swear to God that it's just a coincidence. It really is. But Lauren is from Pennsylvania originally. Joy is from Pennsylvania and still lives there. Krish has lived in Pittsburgh most of his life and still does. I swear that's just a coincidence. And you know what else? The other regular is Jeff Epstein. Jeff lives in Philadelphia. Oh man, I just realized that. I'm like, wait a second, Jeff's in Pennsylvania too. I swear to God, it's a coincidence. You might not believe me, and I don't blame you. I get it. Ron only allows Pennsylvania people to be his regulars. That's a fair thing to start and to say about me. I mean, how can I defend myself? All of them. Fucking all four of them. I swear to God it's a coincidence, but I understand if you don't believe me. Maybe I have a bias I don't realize, but fuck, all of them have ties. That's not on purpose, I swear. You don't have to believe me. I won't fault you if you do. I really don't. All right. So anyway, what I'm hoping is that they will join me for the various headline streams, hopefully once a month for each of them. I'll be talking to each of them and trying to figure that out. If not, I'll just be doing the headline stream solo, and I'll be calling that headlines, like, so on Thursdays we do headlines. The guests where the segments where I have a guest, that's just a general interview. And another reason I'm doing that. Oh, wait. So the other thing, out of all the regulars, the one person who doesn't just go through the news of the day with me is Jeff Epstein. Not the bad Jeff Epstein, the good MMT Jeff Epstein. Jeff, as those of you who tuned in yesterday know, Jeff does an MMT segment with me once a month. So we're going to keep that segment. There's no reason to change that. Every second Monday of the month at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific, Jeff and I do an MMT-centric stream where it's not necessarily about news of the day. It kind of is, but it's more about an MMT topic and how it relates to something going on in the world. So what we'll do is that week, Jeff will just be the interview that week. So Jeff will just be a regular interview, and that segment will continue. So Jeff's thing will not change. Jeff and I will still do that. I've been enjoying those MMT segments. Those have been growing slow but sure. I know some of you have been tuning in and you've really been digging it. Some of you haven't been tuning into that as much, but I hope you'll give it a shot. Even if you're not, maybe you're not super familiar with MMT, maybe you're just kind of dipping your toe in it. We break down a lot of stuff and we have some very constructive conversations. And I really enjoy talking to Jeff about these issues. So that segment will continue. And hopefully all of the regular contributors, that'll all continue too. You'll just be seeing them on Thursdays more often. That's all. It'll just be on Thursdays. And in the meantime, I'll be doing the shorts. And so for everyone who listens to the podcast, unless for some reason episodes get way shorter, I'll just be dropping 2 podcasts a week. One of them will be the Headlines podcast that will come out Thursdays, unless otherwise noted due to my tour schedule. And the other podcast will just be an interview podcast that will happen at a different time during the week. So the interview podcast will just be built around the guest, and the Headlines podcast will be the headlines of the day. It'll be the news we're talking about that week, and it'll be a summary of all the news that I talked about in shorts earlier in the week. And that's how I'm going to do it. That's how I'm going to do it. Oh, and again, every single piece of content will be posted on Patreon and Rockfin. Every single piece. So again, if you want a place to just get all my stuff easily and all the bonus stuff, patreon.com/RonFlacone. And by the way, I'm going to be doing some solo touring in 2022. Patrons get free tickets to some of those shows. So when it's a solo show, when it's just me, you get free tickets if you're a patron. So, and there's going to be a lot of shows in 2022 where there's going to be free tickets available. So patreon.com/RonFlacone. It's a hell of a deal. It really is. So yeah. Anyway, I think that's it. I think that covers the announcement. So that's what I'm going to do. Next week, I'm not going to be streaming. There won't be any podcasts next week. I guess unless something crazy happens. But bar nothing crazy, there won't be any full-length streams next week. There'll still be some shorts. There'll still be some patrons activity and some Rockfin Premium activity, but there won't be any regular streams because I'll be working on this transition. The last announcement I am going to make in regards to this transition, and this just has to do with general things. This isn't even having to do with the restructure of the show. 2022 is coming, and that means there's an election coming. And I get a lot of inquiries during an election year. A lot of people reach out to me, which I appreciate very much. I really do. It flatters me and honors me that people think that want to be on my show, that think my show is brings value. Now, I'm also, I guess I am of the size where I get a lot of inquiries. I'm big enough, or however you want to put it, that I get a lot of inquiries, but I'm also still a very small operation, and I'm small enough to the point where I cannot afford to hire somebody to help me. Nobody does my booking or anything like that. I do all of that myself. I am a one-man shop, so I get a fair amount of inquiries, and I can only get to so many of them, and I do my absolute best. So my announcement in regards to this, I am going to put my money where my mouth is, or not really my money not in the literal sense, not literally money. You know what I mean, metaphorically. Basically, I'm going to practice what I preach. And you guys know that when it comes to electoralism, I view electoralism as an over-amplified tool. We spend way too much time talking about it, and it is just one tool in the toolkit for change. Other tools that we should amplify more: protests, strikes, direct action, cause-based initiatives. Those are all things that I try to spend more time on than electoralism. And I also say, when you are going to focus on electoralism, you should really, really focus locally. And that's very important. I'm not saying that people shouldn't run for Congress. I get it. That's part of it. I'm not saying don't do that. I'm just saying I like to spend my efforts elsewhere. That's just me. Doesn't make me any better or worse than anyone else. It's just who I am. It takes insiders and outsiders, and baby, I'm an outsider. That's just who I am. I ain't meant for the inside. And what little enthusiasm for electoralism I have, it's more on the local level. So, along with this transition, I'm going to start practicing what I preach a little bit better. And the electoralism I will focus on the show, local, is going to be prioritized. So I am going to prioritize people running for city council, people running for mayor, people running for maybe even school board. Who knows? You get the idea. I'm going to focus on localism. And it's not just going to be where I live in Los Angeles. It'll be all over the country. But it'll be someone who is doing something local and trying to get into electoralism on a local level. And my goal with that is it'll kind of serve as kind of a template to say, hey, there's a lot of value in investing in politics locally. We spend so much time on federal. We spend so much time on state. We spend so much time, trying to break down the DNC machine, whether it's through Dem entering or whether it's through a third party or whatever. When I say electoralism, I don't just mean Dem entering, I mean all of electoralism. So maybe, just maybe, for every 10 inquiries I get, maybe 2 or 3 of them will be people running for city council or people running for mayor. Instead of now it's maybe 1. It's probably less. It's probably more. Out of every 20 emails I get, 1 of them will be somebody running for something local. 1 of them out of 20. And I'm not saying that people are bad. Again, I'm not saying don't run for Congress. I'm not saying I wouldn't have you on my show. I still will. I'm just saying that electoralism is not my thing, and localism is very important. That gets overlooked. So I want to amplify that. So as I'm going through things from now on, and especially in 2022, I'm going to prioritize city council. I'm going to prioritize mayor. I'm going to prioritize local politics over federal and state. That's not to say I'm not going to have on anybody. I will, but that's going to be my priority. And I know this isn't sexy. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I know this isn't sexy. This isn't, I mean, this doesn't get as much traffic. This doesn't get as much clicks. This doesn't get as many downloads. I know that, but it's very undercovered. So I'd rather cover something that I'm passionate about than just do, you know what I mean? I mean, people told me not to cover net neutrality as much as I do because they're like, oh, no one cares. All right, well, I care. So I'm going to talk about it. And I'm still like, I still talk about net. I talk about net neutrality. I talk about municipal broadband. I highlight those issues. I'm going to continue to. I'm not going to stop because it's called Get Your News On with Ron. And I'm Ron. And this is just news I care about. This is news that I believe is important. And if you believe it's important too, well, then fuck. Welcome. If you don't think it's important, if you're like, I don't give a shit about this stuff. I don't give a shit about localism. I don't give a shit about strikes or protests or direct action or general strikes or mutual aid. I don't give a shit about, that's fine. That's fine. I'm easy to ignore. But, so I'm going to start practicing what I preach a little bit better. I'm not saying I wasn't doing that before, but I'm going to make more of an effort. So that's the announcement. Thursdays is going to be our main headline streaming day. That's when we're going to do all the news of the week in long form. And throughout the week, I'm going to be dropping more of these shorts. You guys like them, so I'm going to keep dropping them. So for the podcast listeners, there's going to be a headlines podcast once a week, and then an interview podcast where I'm just going to interview someone. Because that's the other thing. It's harder for me to get guests because I would combine the formats where it would be like, you would get your news on with me and then I would interview you. That made it harder to get guests because some guests, they didn't feel super comfortable, having to talk about news on the spot like that. You know what I mean? Which I understand, especially if you're a musician. I get it, so now the interviews are just going to be focused on interviews, like the interview I did with Richard Wolff, the interview I did with Gabriel Rockhill, the academic, the interview I did with Red, the mutual aid activist up in Seattle. That's one of my favorite episodes I've ever done. That's one of, and if you haven't, please check it out. It's mutual aid with Red. You can find it on the podcast. You can find it on my channel. That is one of my favorite episodes of Get Your News On with Ron that's ever happened. So I want to start doing more of that. I want to start doing, just having interviews with those types of people, mutual aid activists, strike activists. I already do that, but I want to do more of it, and I just want to have it structured a little bit better. So that's what's going to happen here on Get Your News On with Ron. And I hope you guys stay with me through the journey. I appreciate your understanding. I appreciate the way you guys have reached out to me when all the bullshit was going on with YouTube. I appreciate it very much. And those are some of the changes. And I think in short, all the things that are going good aren't going to change. All the things that are causing me a headache, we're just going to change it to make it easier. And thank you guys.
Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. You can tweet me an article at Ron Placone. We'll go through it together and make it our own. Get your